The first rating system we're going to talk about, building design and construction. Like I said, this is really the most general, most common LEED rating system being applied. It's for new construction or major renovations. And the manual for it is called Guide for Green Building Design and Construction. And it covers really any building type, started with offices primarily, but you pretty much see the whole spectrum now: institutional, commercial, laboratories, churches, even manufacturing plants. Important thing to note that residential buildings over 3 stories, so starting at 4 stories, become LEED for new construction. They're not LEED for homes, which is a rating system we'll talk about in a few slides. LEED operations and maintenance. So this is existing buildings. So this is a separate rating system, but it's still relating to those categories we discussed, just in a different way. So it's really talking about whole building approach still, but it's the maintenance of the building, what you use to clean it, how much maintenance the envelope requires, and how you have to take care of it, and what are your practices in doing so. Do you use gray water maybe to power wash your building, or cars if that has something to do with your building? So it's looking at how you take care of your building. Recycling program, so it's talking about the occupants too, and how they're engaging in the building. And systems upgrades, so that's our energy efficiency and water use reduction, and really look at those systems, maybe stormwater management, and looking at that holistically. And the process is a little bit different, especially the timeline in a LEED for existing buildings, operations, and maintenance. You need to first identify opportunities. So where's my building at right now? How are we on energy efficiency? Where are the energy hogs happening in our building? And it's really maybe the first time you look at it. That's probably the most important part about this whole process, is getting people to look at their building and how it's operating and how they're engaging in it. It could be as simple as set points on a thermostat. Who knows? That's about 3 months, kind of get the ball rolling. Implementation, 3 to 6 months. These times can vary. These are kind of averages. So it's talking about strategies you're going to do to start improving the weak areas. Then there's a performance period, and this is the important timeline part. Minimum 3 months for various strategies and systems. 1 year is needed for energy. So here we're looking at real data with the building in use for 1 year. Then documentation. So once you get all that data, then you document it. And you must apply within 60 days of that performance period. So you can't collect the data, change all your practices, then document it. They want to keep a steady flow, make sure this is current data. So within 60 days of performance period, and then you go through the certification process to see where you ended up. And so there's a preliminary certification and then a final. So the whole process typically takes about 18 months. If you're already in good shape, it could be much less than that, especially shave off, 5 months or so. But that's something to anticipate, especially if you're gung-ho, go to your CEO or building owner or whatever you have and say, I want to do LEED for existing buildings and we'll be certified and we'll market this in a month. It does take time, and that's the important part about it, as these things do take time and you need to commit. But you gain payback along the way. So just looking at that more general terms, first you want to audit the building, see where you're at. You want to plan the actions to address where you're at and how to improve. Measure once you implement those things, and then adjust. And this is the ongoing maintenance. So operations and maintenance isn't just talking about that performance period per year, but what do you have planned to keep up on this building and systems, and to be constantly adjusting it to make sure it's running at its optimum point. Why put in systems if they're not running at their optimum point? Might as well actually be using them like they were designed to be. So some questions, some things you want to look out for, and that's why I mentioned facility managers are typically the ones asking this question, but a lot of times there's turnover and things. There needs to be kind of a guide for how this is done in a building. Do HVAC filters need replacing? Are the fan belts functioning properly? These are all questions that often don't get looked at enough. But also, things like, is a hot water heater using more energy than it needs to be? All of a sudden we have an opportunity for savings. We can target in there. Is solar water heating have enough payback to be rationalized in this project because we're using a lot of energy there? Certain building types benefit more from different systems. And that's really what it's about. There's not a one-size-fits-all. So that's what that adjustment period is too. Seeing those opportunities, changing it. Case study, speaking of real numbers, this is the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. So they're leading the way. They actually did it themselves, walk the talk. We're big on that, get real. They did it. They invested $500,000, and they did that in terms of efficiency upgrades to their equipment and processes, but also how people are operating and interacting with the building. And these improvements generated cost savings of $610,000 every year. So those upgrades paid for themselves in less than a year. And then past that point, that's great, but if you take just a standard 8% capitalization rate, then all of a sudden the total asset value of the building goes up by $12 million. This is the type of new equation that needs to be looked at, and that's why we need the CPAs, we need the brokers to be speaking this language as well, because the financing should be backing this up. And right now the banks are starting to talk about it. The intent is there. They all have initiatives. We need some implementation. We need for it to get real. We need to see action. All right, lead interior design and construction. So this is really for your tenant fit outs. This could happen in a core and shell building, which we'll look at next, or just coming in and retrofitting an area. You're really talking about the interior space itself. This is Miroti, and in the Northwest we have a nice resource for people just getting started. I'm trying to see what's out there in the green industry today, what's available. This is a good place to start, EcoHouse. They help you with eco-friendly material selection. Good start. And this is what they did. Just one example. So YOLO Color House Paint, they're a new company. They're Green Seal certified. We'll talk about these standards. Like I said, when you're asking questions, when they say we're low VOC, so we're not emitting toxins that are harmful to people, we'll have you verified that. Are you Green Seal certified? You have to know what standard to be looking for to make sure you're getting a product that actually has gone through the testing and is really doing it. But they're water-based paint, 0 VOC, they're really doing it. Squawk Mountain Stone, that's the countertop you see there, and these are just examples of what they implemented from going to EcoHouse. Made from recycled waste paper, so that wasted paper went into something new, food for a new product. Glass dust and low carbon cement to make that countertop. Curie board is that backboard you see there in the bottom picture. Nice aesthetic to it, so this isn't like we're downgrading. This is can have its own beautiful look. So in Japanese that means clean and beautiful. So what that product is made from is stalks from the sorghum plant. After they've been harvested, those stalks would be just burned, and instead they're taking those stalks and making this product. This is another case where you have to look at the big picture of is this the best product to be buying, because then we have that carbon footprint if it's flying from Asia over here. So you always want to be looking at the big picture, but that is a positive thing that they turned would have just been wasted, burned into a product. So reclaimed agricultural fiber, agrofiber. All right, lead core and shell. So this acknowledges the limited control that developers often have over their projects. So they're allowed to get a pre-certification to market their building, because that is, a lot of the push right now. They're seeing those rent ratios go up. They're seeing that occupancy ratio go up. So they're allowing them to market earlier on. And when you say they don't have total control of the project, that's because with the core and shell project, they're just controlling the core of the project. So that's your mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and the envelope. not really the tenant fit outs that we saw previously in LEED for commercial interiors. So those two rating systems can often go together. In fact, LEED for core and shell encourages guidelines to be made for new tenants on how to satisfy the LEED for commercial interiors criteria. So things can work together even between the various rating systems. Then you can go further. You can do LEED for operations and maintenance and keep up on your building and make sure all those great systems you put in are actually functioning at their optimum level and you're getting the payback that you thought you would. There are limits to when you can apply for core and shell. The owner cannot occupy more than 50% of the leasable square footage. So that's the cutoff there. So it's really for people or for developers that don't have total control of their building, but are trying to use these strategies and implementing these green building criteria in the LEED rating system. LEED for schools, once again, very important. You know, we know that these buildings have, in history, or not long history, but recent history, been the most dilapidated buildings. And these are where our kids are going to school. So you can do everything that you can do in your power, feed them right, buy organic food, try to keep them healthy, and then they're spending most of their time in a toxic building. And that's unfortunate. So this has been a big push in LEED for schools, really trying to make that change. And there's been a lot of good funding, a lot of good push there. And it is its own rating system using those same categories we talked about. Go through them again just so you get familiar. Sustainable sites, water efficiency, energy and atmosphere, materials and resources, and indoor environmental quality. So we're still working within that framework, but we're addressing especially the needs for kids. So if you're going to go for LEED for schools, it's any academic building on a K through 12 school campus. If it's a non-academic building on that campus or that site, then it can go for either new construction or for the LEED for schools rating system. So just some options there. LEED for homes. This is where we start to divert a little bit from just those categories I just listed. All those ones we just discussed previously fit into those 5 main categories and then that innovation design. But LEED for homes, we have 2 additional categories we'll look at that just apply more to homes. It's different in more than just that way though. How you actually apply for LEED for homes is different as well. The first thing you do is you contact a LEED for homes provider. So these are basically people who have been contracted through the USGBC to be a LEED for homes provider. And what they're meant to do is to market to builders so they understand that that opportunity is out there, and then provide rating support to actually implement the criteria, meet those standards, what are the strategies they can use, train and oversee the people inspecting the buildings, and basically to encourage a holistic approach similar to any other building. But it's the LEED for homes provider part that's very important to remember, that that is your first step, and that is something that's different from the other rating systems. Another one that is a bit different than the first ones we talked about, LEED neighborhood development. So this has evolved a bit as well since I worked on that LEED neighborhood development pilot in Dubai, but the principles are the same. Instead of those 5 main categories, we're down to 3: smart location and linkage, neighborhood pattern and design, and green infrastructure and buildings. And then you have innovation and design process similar to before, and then regional priority credits. This is a big change we'll look at, that we're addressing the differences in the regions and how we want to build. But remember that LEED neighborhood development varies in the credit categories. So this is new urbanism. This is something that Portland's very proud of. Said the Pearl District really embodies this. They truly did it in creating a compact, walkable neighborhood. Everything's kind of at human scale. High connected street networks. So that's important for walkability, being able to get around, not having to go over a highway. Density. So people are able to live, where they work, where their basic services are. You can just go down to the little corner mart to get your basic milk and food supplies, go to the bank. All this is in a dense, walkable radius. Range of housing for diverse populations. So there's the equity side again, that you can't just create a great, vibrant community that's only for affluent people. That's not sustainable. That's not going to work forever. It's going to end up being an empty place. So that's something that's important to keep in mind. And regional planning. What's important to your area? Here, we want to be looking at stormwater management on a community scale. That would be important. Enhance locations. This is part of smart locations and linkages. So this is the first big category in the LEED for neighborhood development rating system. Preserve sensitive lands. So preserving green fields, natural places, good for agriculture, that have not been developed on yet, keeping those how they are. We have our urban growth boundary, and that's kind of something we're conscious of here in Oregon. And that's something you'll see in the other rating systems as well as we look at new construction. Locate jobs near housing. That has not only convenience factors, but less CO2 emissions because less automobile use. Provide bicycle amenities. We're a bike town. We know the benefits of that. Measure location. Proximity to existing development. So you don't have to rebuild all new infrastructure. You know, if you build a sustainable community and it's not creating its own energy or renewing or reusing all of its water, then that would be a living community. That's great, be off the grid. But typically, we need to connect all those sewer lines and all those water lines, and the electrical grid needs to go out to that community, and all of a sudden there's a lot of resources being dumped into just doing that. So thinking about reusing what's already there in a smart way. All right, so we're talking about LEED neighborhood development. And like we mentioned, that Copenhagen is a big leader in this and really doing it, being very successful, vibrant town. And they embody these principles. They're ingrained in the culture. And that's that paradigm shift I hope we start seeing more in this country. That's not such an effort, such a push. So it's really based on this idea of new urbanism we see in LEED neighborhood development rating system. Mass transit, something Portland's very good at. Bikes, mixed-use buildings, so that's that living on top of restaurants, commercial spaces, be able to go to the market again. Natural landscape, so really having that interwoven within the sites. You can actually walk to a park, have greenways in between buildings. Another thing you could definitely see in the Pearl. So community interaction, that's what happens when things are at human scale. You've got cafes spilling out, you have parks adjacent to buildings, all of a sudden you know your neighbor, which is a huge plus. And once again, that's that social side of sustainability. So social, economic, environmental, all playing together to make a successful project, community, city. Could be at any scale. Neighborhood pattern and design. So this is the second category of the three main categories of neighborhood development. So it has to do with a variety of buildings. So preserving those historic buildings. So we built things to last in this country far better a few decades ago. Probably not a good idea to tear them down if we don't have to. Or if you're using a building or have a site with an existing building, see what you can reuse and recreate with at least the materials on that site. Price ranges need to vary. There's that equity side again, and having a vibrant community that sustains for the long term, because that's really the core of sustainability, your ability to sustain. Parks, markets, we have a lot of farmers markets in Portland, and that are very popular, knowing where your food came from. That's a part of sustainability. Community involvement in the planning. This is a big one. Working in architecture, I would have to present in front of design review panels with the city, and then the community would come in, and we would get chastised sometimes for our designs. And I'd always leave thinking, well, why didn't we ask them sooner? We just designed a whole building. You know, why didn't we have this input sooner? So once again, I just think this makes sense. And that's what integrated design has to do with. Eco charrettes are about getting everybody in the same room and talking about these things very early in the design process, so you're informed during the whole design process. Compact, complete, connected neighborhoods. So that's a very important characteristic of this part of the rating system. So people are connected to the place and to each other because there's these vibrant outdoor areas and human scale activities. Green infrastructure and buildings. So roof gardens can be a communal area, or maybe it's where a restaurant gets its food, like at the Burnside Rocket. Community gardens, playgrounds, even a wetland, a lot of biodiversity. You can't recreate that. You can't put a little fake pond on some grass and think you're going to get the ecological action you'll have in a natural wetland. These are very important parts of our ecology. And help with stormwater management, which is very important to this region. So maybe that's a good outdoor space for the Northwest. Multiple certifications for one building. So we just went over the LEED rating systems in the different variety. So we had LEED for new construction, building design and construction. We had LEED commercial interiors. We had LEED operations and maintenance for existing buildings. LEED core and shell for buildings where the developer doesn't control the tenant fit outs, and LEED neighborhood development and LEED for homes. So we had a good variety there, and LEED for schools, which is very important. So it's important to know that these interact. These different rating systems don't have to stand alone. There are categories you may fit into when you first start a project, but after that, there's areas you want to build on to keep improving these projects and maintain them. So a project that went for new construction may then go for operations and maintenance to maintain the building, keep it running at the optimum level, and also could be a LEED neighborhood development. So LEED neighborhood developments have LEED buildings in them. One example of this is Dockside Green up in Vancouver, BC. We're right now holding the highest LEED rating ever achieved. I know a developer right here in Oregon, in Independence, that has a project called Independence Station where he's trying to take that back, bring it here, but that's what they did. They really looked at things holistically and they looked at long term, and it's a great success. So there's multiple certifications for a building or a neighborhood, and there's also multiple buildings that can get certified in a more streamlined process. This is a pretty new component of LEED that gets overlooked, and developers or organizations that own a lot of buildings, this is crucial to streamlining the documentation process. Like I said, we're working on multiple federal projects at EcoReal, and we're starting to talk about that conversation. The GSA is pushing these standards and trying to move forward and keep things progressing. Don't let documentation hold you up. So the USGBC has thought about this. We want to encourage that. If there are people that own a lot of square footage, we want to encourage that they're doing this to multiple buildings. Let's make it easier for them. So there is a portfolio program, and it's currently the multiple building certification system or rating system appendix is starting to evolve into LEED 2009. That's something that's kind of playing some catch up right now, but it's a very important thing that's offered, that you can streamline the process, kind of prototypical credits for certain type of buildings. If you build the same type of building multiple times, like the government typically does, this is an important way for LEED certification to happen on a volume scale. Organizations or developers are starting to realize this opportunity, and really, especially for LEED for existing buildings, this has a lot of pickup to it right now because developers are seeing the numbers, they're seeing results, they're starting to share them. You know, these occupancy rates going up and rent ratios going up, and so all of a sudden other developers are doing it, and we're seeing this kind of trickle effect. And you know, even Walmart having an Eco-Mart because they made more money by having skylights in their areas. Those places in the building, they tested out where they only had half the Walmart store have skylights in that area, and they actually sold more in that area. They tracked the numbers, and so they said, well, let's do this in all our stores, you know, follow the numbers. That's why the business case is very important. And then it in turn helps our environment, helps us socially. LEED category, so it's kind of a review of the big picture. So for LEED, building design construction, for new buildings, and interior design and construction, commercial interiors, and operation and maintenance for existing buildings. We have these 5 main categories: stable sites, water efficiency, energy atmosphere, materials and resources, and indoor environmental quality. And then innovation design and regional priority credits are kind of in this bonus credit area, but they're very important, and we're going to talk about those more in depth. Additional categories for LEED for homes. Important to note the differences: education and awareness. So since you're so engaged with your home, education and awareness took a precedent there. Location and linkages is also additional. And location linkages is similar to LEED for neighborhood development. That's where it is its own set of categories. For LEED for homes, those are 2 additional categories. In addition to these 5, LEED for neighborhood development, it's just those 3 main categories. So sustainable, location and linkages, neighborhood pattern design, and green infrastructure and buildings. So remember those key differences. But there's similarities. The principles really align with them all. Beautiful representation of the LEED building design and construction rating system and where the points lie. So this is important, that things aren't weighted equally. That's something that LEED 2009 did that we will look at later in this presentation, that some areas take precedent over others. Like energy and atmosphere was seen as having the biggest environmental and economic impact, and health impact as well. So there's 35 points just in that one category. So that's a heavily weighted category. So you see in yellow, that's something that is important to the LEED rating system. You see sustainable sites takes a second there. So big chunk of the pie, energy. Second biggest would be sites. And then we have indoor environmental quality is quite a few points, and so on. But they do vary in these categories, and that's important to note. Operations and maintenance. So this shows the categories are the same, but maybe there's different things that would be important to an existing building. So here you can see that energy and atmosphere is the same, but water efficiency points went up. The credits are more heavily weighted in water for existing buildings because there's more you can do to existing building. You know, materials went down because maybe you're not switching out materials. Maybe that's decided to be a little wasteful, but you are putting an aerator on your sinks, things of that nature, things you can control. Maybe you're switching out toilets because the water savings is worth it. Going to, you know, the standard right now is 1.6 gallons per flush. The old toilets are about double that. So that could be worthwhile for an existing building. LEED for homes, so you see in yellow those 2 additional categories. Once again, energy heavily weighted, sites heavily weighted, and then indoor environmental quality, of course materials, and water after that. So more little chunks in the pie for LEED for homes.